Hello everybody, this is JT Productions and welcome back to another video. Today will be my end of season, regular season, top 25. I've done two other ones of these for the season. I did one before the season, now I did one mid-season, and this is the end of the trilogy. This is my final top 25, of course before the bowl games, but if I do another one of these, it will be after the bowl games, after the national championship, and a preseason top 25 for next season. So, let's go ahead and get into it. So, at number 25, as you can probably see, I have Fresno State. Fresno State this season had a rough patch there after Jake Hayner got injured against USC early in the season, missed some games, and caused them to lose games to, I believe, USC, Boise State, and some other teams. Besides that, they ended the season 9-4 with a Mountain West championship where they beat Boise State with Jake Hayner and ended up, like I said, being Mountain West champions. So, ended up pretty good for them. Next up at number 24, I have the 11-2 UTSA Roadrunners. Conference USA champs, and they are still dominant, just like they were last year. Frank Harris is absolute monster. I forget if he's a sophomore or if he's a junior. Anyways, he had another great season. They ended up beating North Texas in the championship game, the team that beat them last year in the regular season, sort of keeping them from a undefeated season. But besides that, they had a great season, and they're going to go up against another ranked team on my schedule in a bowl game in the Troy Trojans, who are the team at number 23, the 11-2 Troy Trojans. Troy just came out of nowhere. They won 11 games, beat Coastal Carolina, who was my favorite to win the Sun Belt this year, and won the Sun Belt, and blew out Coastal Carolina at that. But they played really good ball and earned their way to my top 25. I have not a lot to say about them. I ain't gonna lie to you. I ain't researched much about Troy before this video, so that's why, just off the cuff. Next up, number 22, I have Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish ended the season 8-4 and ended the season strong. I think they started something like 1-3 on the year, but they ended strong with wins against Clemson and almost beating USC and Ohio State in week 1. But they ended the season hot before that loss, and I forget who they're playing. I think they're playing South Carolina in, I forget which bowl, but that'll be a good matchup, them versus South Carolina. All right, number 21, I'm going to try to speed through these. Number 21, I have the American champ, the Tulane Green Wave at 11-2. What a great year for Willie Fritz and that Green Wave team. It seems like they had so much potential for a couple of years, and they just could not capitalize on it. But they finally did it with, what's his name? Their quarterback, who's been there a couple of years. He's a great quarterback. And they did it with good defense and good running game. They play USC in the Cotton Bowl, so we'll see if they're able to keep up with the Trojans. At number 20, I have the 8-4 Mississippi State Bulldogs. Rest in peace, Mike Leach. I hate it for everybody around that program and around him that were close to him, and even fans of him. Even me, I was a fan of him from afar. I was a fan of his press conferences, and I can appreciate what he did for the offense of college football. But Mississippi State had a great year, 8-4. They exceeded expectations that I had for them. They had a couple of mixed performances, especially against LSU and Alabama. And, they were playing Alabama and Georgia. Those two losses, those were an uphill battle. But they also lost to LSU, and who else did they lose to? Did they lose to Auburn? I don't think they lost to Auburn. They lost to somebody else. I can't remember it. I'll think of it later. But they had a good season. I hope everything goes all right with everybody around that program and everybody around Mike Leach. So rest in peace. Hope nothing bad happens to y'all's program. I'm glad that the team is playing in their bowl game for him and not opting out. I'd love to see him play. However, I wouldn't blame him if they had canceled it for that reason. At number 19, I have the Texas Longhorns at 8-4. What a second year for Steve Sarkisian. After the first year coming out, not making a bowl game, going 5-7, going into the year with big expectations, beating Oklahoma, shutting them out, I might add, keeping up with Alabama, and a game away from making it to a Big 12 championship. A big lead for Steve Sarkisian and that team. They have Quinn Ewers at quarterback, and they're getting Arch Manning. So they're going to be set on offense for a couple of years. We'll see how that defense turns out. The offensive line, even though they were very young, played above their weight class. So kudos to Texas, and we'll see how y'all do next year, see if y'all can take the next step. Number 18, I have the LSU Tigers. LSU finished the season 9-4 with an SEC championship appearance and an SEC championship loss. Brian Kelly's first year was a success in all regards for the LSU program. They beat Alabama. They beat Florida. They beat Auburn. They beat their three biggest rivals. But they had some miscues in two main losses, with the 1-point loss to Florida State in Week 1 off the block field goal or block extra point, and the absolute domination that they lost to Texas A&M in dominating fashion. Texas A&M came into their terrible in the year. I think they finished 5-7, but they ended up beating LSU, and they ended up dominating them. The other two losses came to a blowout loss at home to Tennessee and a blowout loss to Georgia in the SEC championship. It's looking good for LSU for future, so we'll see how Brian Kelly does in year 2 next year. At number 17, I have the South Carolina Gamecocks. South Carolina went 8-4, but finished the season beating two top 5 teams, I believe, in Tennessee and Clemson. That really impressed me. Shane Beamer came out. They had a lot of offensive miscues in the first few weeks. They started, I think, 1-2, losing to Arkansas and Georgia, and then came out and won a couple of games, but then lost some other head-scratchers like to Missouri and to Florida, but ended the season strong. And they're going to be playing Notre Dame in a bowl game, so that's going to be a good matchup. I'm ready to see that game, especially if there's not a lot of opt-outs. I would love to see a full-strength South Carolina and Notre Dame. Number 16, I have the UCLA Bruins at 9-3. UCLA, their best year under Chip Kelly. What a year it was, too. Dorian Thompson-Robinson had a great year. Zach Charbonnet had a great year. That defense, to Chip Kelly standards, was a very good unit. Offensively, they were just running on all cylinders. They had a few hiccups against Oregon, USC, and I forget who the other team was that beat them. I can't remember, but in all regards, it was a great season for UCLA. I'll be glad to see them in their bowl game. And I don't know if DCR will be playing or not, but we'll just have to see. At number 15, we have the Oregon Ducks. Dan Lanning, first-year head coach for them, gets them to 9-3 with a lot of Mario Cristobal's recruits. But either way, a great season for him with Bo Nix putting up Heisman numbers, which is very surprising. The defense for Oregon, it's probably going to take a year or two for them to get really where Dan Lanning wants them to be. But the offense was on all cylinders. Sadly, they're losing Kenny Dillingham to Arizona State, I believe, in the coaching carousel. But besides that, it was a great year for Oregon. We'll see if they can stay at this level or even take the next step next year. At number 14, I have the Oregon State Beavers. Oregon State, what a year. 9-3 and a win over your biggest rival, Oregon. Dude, I thought Oregon State was going to be good. I didn't think they were going to be this good. I didn't think that they were going to be fighting for a spot in the championship game. In the, Pac-12 championship game. But either way, great year for Oregon State. And like with all these other teams that are around 8-4, 9-3, we'll see if they can continue that. Number 13, Florida State. Florida State finally is getting to where they need to be. 9-3 this past year. And what a year it was. They took the next step. They beat Miami. They beat Florida. They almost beat Clemson. They beat LSU. Their 3 losses came right in the middle of the season to Wake Forest, Clemson, and NC State. The other games, they won. If Florida State can continue this dominance over the next couple of years, they'll get back to where they need to be. I think next year will be a year to where they can challenge Clemson for the ACC if they can continue improving, but we'll just have to see. Number 12, I have the USC Trojans. 11-2, another blue blood finally getting back to where they need to be. 11-2 for USC, Lincoln Riley's first year. Caleb Williams wins the Heisman, puts up great numbers, but they could not get past Utah either time. The one team that beat USC was Utah. And both times, the first time was a 1-point loss. The other time was a blowout. Utah just physically dominated them in the championship game. But great year for Lincoln Riley. Give him a couple more years and he'll have USC in the playoffs multiple times. At number 11, I got the Clemson Tigers, the ACC champions at 11-2. Clemson, you can pencil in Clemson for the ACC championship almost every year, and in the playoffs almost every year, but not the last 2 years. They had 2 losses. One was to Notre Dame on the road, and one was to South Carolina at home, where South Carolina broke their home winning streak in Death Valley and just humiliated them. Dabo Swinney finally decided to put in Cade Klubnik after DJ Uyunglele struggled in the ACC championship game, and they look pretty good, so their bowl game against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl should be a pretty good one. 2 backup quarterbacks playing it. Number 10, we got the Utah Utes, the Pac-12 champions. 10-3. They absolutely trounced USC in the Pac-12 championship. They beat USC twice. But early losses early in the season screwed their season to begin with. They lost, I believe, to Florida State, or not Florida State. They lost to Florida on the road by a score. They lost to UCLA, and I believe a blowout. And then they lost by a score to Oregon. If they won both those one-score games, they would be in the playoffs right now, instead of Ohio State. But that's not how it works. So, good year for Utah. We'll see if they can continue that. This. What's it called? It's not dominance. Continue being consistent, I guess, with Cam Rising, I believe, being gone next year. I'm not completely sure, but they should continue being around an 8 to 9 win team, 10 win team. Number 9, we have the Penn State Nittany Lions. Penn State, the only thing is they would be higher, but their 2 best games they lost. Every other game on their schedule, I don't think that they're ranked anymore. I don't think they played Illinois. I don't think they did. But no other team on their schedule is ranked, I don't think. I'd have to check again, but I'm almost certain that no other team is ranked on Penn State's schedule. that's why I can't put them higher than 9. I know they're 10-2, but they lost both their games they needed to win. They lost to Michigan in a blowout, and they lost to Ohio State in a blowout. I know it's close at first, but it's just Penn State, maybe with Drew Aller will be different, but Penn State, if James Franklin cannot win the big games for them, then he just needs to go find a new job where the expectations are not going to be this big. Anyways, let me not drag on about that. Number 8, I got the Kansas State Wildcats, the Big 12 champions, 10-3, and honestly, they should be better than they are. They had 3 losses that define their season pretty much. They lost to daggum Tulane, dude. I know it was before Oklahoma, but dude, you can't. If you're a prestigious program like this, if this Kansas State team that played in the Big 12 championship played Tulane now, they would beat them by 50. But that's not how college football works. They lost to them. They lost to TCU, and I think Oklahoma State. But great season nonetheless. They got a good thing going there. Will Howard's going to be a great quarterback for them in the future. I hope Adrian Martinez is all right enough to play in the bowl game against Alabama. But that's how it is for them. And speaking of Alabama, at number 7, I got Alabama at 10-2. Alabama just has not looked the same since that 2020 season where they won the national championship. You may say, well, they went to the national championship last year. Yeah, but you know how many one-possession games they played in over that span from 2021 to now? The Florida game, the Arkansas game, the Mississippi State one wasn't. The LSU game last year, the Tennessee game to an extent last year, the Auburn game last year, the what was the other one? Who else did they play? This year, the Texas game, the Ole Miss game, the LSU game again, the Tennessee game again, the trying to think, and then those are about it. But 9 that I can think of out of the 24 were close games, and that's 9 out of 16 SEC games. So they just have not looked the same dominant Alabama team. And out of those, Texas A&M, so there's 10. Texas A&M twice, so that's 11. So 11 out of the 16, or 24, 11 out of 24 total games, they have looked just not like Alabama. They made it to the title game last year because they had a generational wide receiver, 2 of them, and Jameson Williams and John Mechie. And they had great defensive players, Christian Harris, Will Anderson, who's came back, and Jalen Armour-Davis, Josh Jobe. All of those guys went to the NFL. This year, they're not that good Alabama team. Their 2 games they lost were by 1 possession, but it shouldn't have been close to begin with. They lost to Tennessee, where they gave up, 500 yards passing to Jalen Hyatt and Hendon Hooker. And then they lost to LSU in overtime by 1. But why do you keep LSU in the game? They just have not looked the same since then. It's the coordinators, I know, but all of these people saying this is just a bad year for Alabama, it's been 2 bad years. You have not looked like the same Alabama since 2020. So I'm going to stop ranting and go on to not make this a 30-minute video. Number 6, the Washington Huskies. Great season for first-year head coach Kalen DeBoer, who came over from Fresno State. He made a sub-500 team into a 10-2 team who only lost, I think, to Arizona State, and I forget who the other one was, but they only lost 2 games. And one Arizona State game was off of a 1-possession loss. Anyways, Michael Penix Jr. had a great season. Heisman worthy, I might add. But there were so many players that could have been in the Heisman. If he would have been if Washington would have been a playoff team, he would have made it to New York. I'm here to say that. But Washington, great season. Speaking of great seasons, at number 5, the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee had its best season since, I believe, 2007. And they went 10-2. Hendon Hooker had a Heisman-worthy season. He got hurt, unfortunately, against South Carolina in their second loss of the year. Their 2 losses were to Georgia on the road and South Carolina on the road. They put up video game-like numbers. Josh Heupel is going to have that team dangerous in a couple of years, especially if he gets a good bit of defensive talent. They're going to be an amazing team. So, especially with this Nico kid, I think he's going to be good, but we'll see. Number 4, I have the Ohio State Buckeyes at 11-1. Same thing with Ohio State I said about Alabama. They just have not looked like Ohio State this year. It looked like they've sleptwalked through games. Look at the Northwestern game, a good bit of the Penn State game, Notre Dame game. And you got blasted by Michigan again this year, dude. Jim Harbaugh said in his press conference, I believe before or after the Ohio State game, Ryan Day is a coach that started on third base, saying that he took Urban Meyer's recruits and made that into a playoff team. Now that he's having to get his own recruits in there, all these recruits are not willing to be as physical as they need to be. And that's why you lost to Michigan that way. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but we'll see. Number 3, I have the TCU Horned Frogs at 12-1. Sonny Dykes, first year, brings them to a 12-0 regular season, almost a 13-0 regular season, if they were not 1 yard short. This is probably the best TCU team since 2014. And that's when they got snubbed in the playoffs. The playoff committee realized their mistake and this year put them in. Thank you, playoff committee. Max Duggan. What can you not say about Max Duggan? Max Duggan poured his heart and soul into that Big 12 championship game. If you've not watched it, go watch the fourth quarter of that game, dude. He was not playing good up until the fourth quarter. When that drive, he put the team on his back and almost single-handedly won the game for them. But you can't hate TCU for that. And number 2, I have the 12-0 Michigan Wolverines, the Big Ten champs. Michigan looks good. I'll give them that. They have a good running game. Sadly, Blake Corum, I hate it for him, got injured and ended his Heisman campaign against Illinois. They've struggled in a couple of games themselves, but we'll see how they do in the playoffs. J.J. McCarthy, if he can progress as a passer, he's going to be a great player. Their defense has not skipped a beat since last year. But I see a lot more cracks in this team than I do some others. So that's why I have them 2. And then finally, number 1, my 12-0 Georgia Bulldogs, the SEC champions. And you could say the same things that I just said about Michigan, you could say about Georgia. However, I think the main thing that separates Georgia and Michigan right now is coaching. Kirby Smart, in my opinion, is a top-tier head coach, close up there with Nick Saban and the greats up there. Harbaugh, in my opinion, is a rank a little bit lower, just 1 rank lower. He's a good head coach, but I don't think that he is the best head coach. I don't think he's a head coach that can outcoach one of the greats. He couldn't do it against Urban Meyer. He couldn't do it against Kirby Smart last year. He hasn't been able to do it against Nick Saban or any of those coaches. This year could be different, but that's just my stance right now. So, anyways, there's my top 25. I'll run through it again right now. Number 25, Fresno State. 24, UTSA. 23, Troy. 22, Notre Dame. 21, Tulane. 20, Mississippi State. 19, Texas. 18, LSU. 17, South Carolina. 16, UCLA. 15, Oregon. 14, Oregon State. 13, Florida State. 12, USC. 11, Clemson. 10, Utah. 9, Penn State. 8, Kansas State. 7, Alabama. 6, Washington. 5, Tennessee. 4, Ohio State. 3, TCU. 2, Michigan. And number 1, Georgia. So, there you go. I hope y'all enjoyed. It's been a great college football season so far. Let's hope bowl season is as great as it has been. And let's hope the playoffs don't disappoint either. So, I hope y'all have a great day, and go Dogs.